Hey, I'm Wes the Explosion, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate just celebrated its 5th anniversary. Since I wasn't making content back when this was relevant, this might be my only chance for a while to make a video listing my most wanted characters for this series. I'll limit it to 10 in my general order of reverse preference, since top 10 lists do well, with some honorable mentions thrown in since I'm indecisive. And I'll just keep it to 1 character per series. Otherwise, 6 of the slots would be Mega Man characters. Though if that's specifically what you're here for, you can skip ahead. I'm pretty sure you can figure out where I put them. I feel like I'm obligated to add a Sonic character, so I'll get it out of the way early and pick Blaze for 10. Definitely not because I secretly like the series or anything. Nope. Anyway, Blaze is easily my favorite of Sonic's cast. You ever see an official character that feels like they were made for you? She's a light purple, or lavender cat, dresses up all nice and fancy, with extra fluff and hot pink heels, and is a princess. Those are quite a few of my favorite things. I also like how she tends to be stoic and has trouble being honest with how she feels, things I can relate to, and she acts kinda knightly a lot too, even being cast as Percival in that crappy Wii game, which ticks another box for me. Her powers are more about controlling flames, which could do a lot to differentiate her from how Sonic already plays in Smash. Unless they do the Roy thing. While I wish she showed up more often in the games, at the same time, I think the fact that she doesn't makes her appearance feel more like a special occasion, adding to her appeal. Distance makes the heart grow fonder and all that jazz. Of course, if she were put into something like Smash, that might diminish some of this, but screw it, I'm being short-sighted with my list. Choose her, not a recolor. Number 9 is... Mighty Number 9, back! Call me a troll if you want, I'll even admit, when I entered him as my choice in the Smash ballot for Wii U, it was half serious, half in jest. But here it's more of a marketing choice. And to make the 9 joke. Smash gets a lot of eyes on a series, and Mighty Number 9 feels like it died too early. While the game was nowhere near as polished as it should have been, given the budget, at the same time, it showed a lot of promise. The basic premise was solid, the gameplay was largely fun, the music was good, and I really liked the designs of the Mighty Numbers. Yeah, Beck is never gonna make it in, and this, more than anyone else on the list, is gonna be a very selfish pick. But I really want a Mighty Number 9-2, 10, a sequel, whatever. Do it quietly, don't let it get overbloated, and make sure it feels finished. And I think we could have an actual viable alternative to Mega Man, since that's going nowhere fast. An inclusion in Smash would really help with this, even if Concept probably doesn't deserve it with how badly they squandered their one chance. There's just still a part of me that doesn't want to give up on it though. When we were edging closer to the Final Fighter reveal, my guess was that they'd do the Byleth thing and put in a character from an upcoming or recent game to promote it, and since they'd wanted to include more Metroid characters but had problems with scale, my money was on Ravenbeak from Dread. And then they went ahead and added Sora. Which is fine, I just don't play those games, that's all. Still, for the reasons I mentioned, I thought he was a pretty good pick, which is why he's 8. Outside of me just not wanting to admit that I was wrong, I just really loved Metroid Dread. I've liked Metroid since I played Fusion, but this one really got me. It did everything the old titles did so well, from the mechanics, progression, and creepy atmosphere, the few good ideas that the missteps had, such as Other M's semi-cinematic attack sequences, and tied up the whole Metroid saga pretty well. While the front and center Emmys might seem like a more obvious choice, I'd give it to Ravenbeak since he's more of a character, being the first enemy you encounter in the opening, and being the main villain of the game. Plus, while he has a lot of unique things going for him, with his equipment being also Chozo obviously, he could pull in some of the new abilities Samus got from Dread that weren't included in her loadout, since that game came out after Ultimate. So yeah, rather than giving her another ult, let's give the Birdman a go. I have a lot of good memories playing Tales of Vesperia with friends, so my pick for 7 is Yuri Lowell. Sorry Lloyd, that was just the title I was able to get people together for the most consistently. Nostalgia aside, he has one of the most bizarre fighting styles I've ever seen, using either a sword or hand axe, which he swings around carelessly, swapping hands between swipes, and throwing in punches occasionally to throw his opponents off guard. I seriously thought I had to be misremembering things and had to look up a video and go frame by frame, but no, he really is going left, right, left with his strikes. Besides that, Vesperia has my favorite set of characters in any of the Tales games I played, and Yuri was the linchpin of the group. Despite teasing the other party members fairly often, he also really cared and treated them with respect, even the kid that everybody else treated as a runt. He followed his own rules, owned up to his mistakes, had a dog that used a pipe that was also a knife somehow, and was bizarrely tough. able to knock out guards wearing helmets by chucking a rock underhanded. Looking back, you could probably call him a cliché or a power fantasy or a Gary Sue, but back when I first played it, I thought he was pretty much the coolest guy ever, and I don't think my memories from that time will ever allow me to see him as otherwise. He was a character I looked up to. As for his moveset, he's from a Tales game. He had like a billion moves. There's a lot to work with without needing to get creative. Danganronpa's kind of in a weird place. It feeling niche, but it having enough popularity and notoriety that I sometimes question if it isn't too big to be niche. Still though, I think it's large enough to warrant a rep, and my brother and I actually discussed this, trying to figure out whether Makoto or Hajime would work better and what kind of moveset they could even have. I'm not sure how the more obvious choice escaped our notice initially, but number 6 is Monokuma. Not only is he the face of the franchise, but I just want to kill him over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Would it be a waste for them to add a character largely because people want them dead? And to do the deed personally? Seriously, nothing good ever happens when this guy's around. Either he's there to make things actively worse, or openly laugh in your face if something awful happened without his help. Typically a murder between friends. I just want to punch him. I just want to punch him so much. As for his moveset, he does plenty of slapstick gags and has a ton of murderous alternates in Ultra Despair Girls that they could include a lot of deep cut references in how he plays. Or they could just have him slash people with his claws, whatever. If he got added in, whenever he would turn up in a match, I'd attempt to make a temporary truce with the other players to make sure he was the first one out. My favorite Pokemon, Gardevoir, gets number 5, and don't be gross about it. I raise these guys like they're my children, and my favorite specific Pokemon is actually Morgan, my specially bred Shiny from X. I should probably retrieve her through Pokebank, but I don't want to give up her Mega. Anyway, I tend to like bipedal Pokemon, since standing shoulder to shoulder with them makes it feel more like we're partners than master and pet, and Fairy's my favorite type. I also tend to gravitate towards cuter or more elegant Pokemon, so Gardevoir ticks all the boxes. Not only that, but I really like Knights in media, which I touched on earlier. And you know what their Japanese name is? Sir Knight. That's right, while they might look like they're supposed to be some sort of weird alien lady, they're actually meant to be a mage knight. And that this seemed to go over a lot of people's heads might have been why we got Gallade. Anyway, loyalty is a trait I highly prize, which is another point in their favor. For broader points, Smash currently doesn't have any Gen 3 reps, plus with its typing, it can learn a wide variety of attacks, from the obvious zoner stuff like Moonblast and Psychic, to more close and personal stuff like Zen Headbutt and, for some reason, the Elemental Punches. And hey, you could get a bit crazier and make Gallade and Iron Valiant alternate skins, giving additional representation for Gens 4 and 9, and borrowing from their move pools for extra variety. Beyond just my bias, they'd be an incredibly versatile addition. Number 4. I like Shantae, both the games and character. I like platformers. I like Metroidvanias. I like the mechanics. I like collecting stuff. I like genies, obviously. I like the characters and the quirky writing. And while I could try to be sly about it and say that I like the character designs, I'll acknowledge the elephant in the room, no, not that one, and say that I do enjoy fan service as long as it's not the only thing something has going for it. As for Shantae herself, she acts pretty tomboyish, to the point where you could say she fits a lot of the shonen protagonist tropes, being headstrong and sometimes reckless, seeing the best in most people, even her enemies, fighting tooth and nail for what she believes in, occasionally using power of friendship, orphan, and while not what I'd call dumb, still being susceptible to clever ruses. As someone who reads Shonen Jump every week, this appeals to me. Oh, and she transforms and is a genie, so she's a literal magical girl on top of that. Her main means of fighting is whipping enemies with her hair, which as someone who prizes my own quite a bit, I do appreciate. She's another one that'd be easy to make a moveset for, with her aforementioned ponytail, her magic spells, animal transformations, and pirate tools. The hardest part might be narrowing it down, to be honest. I want to put a knight in 3, but which knight? The titular Shovel Knight? Spectre Knight, who I love playing the most mechanically. Or King Knight, whose campaign and story I like the most. This was the last part of the script I wrote out, specifically because I was having trouble making a decision, but you know what? I've made enough other questionable choices in this video, what's one more? I'm going King. Playing through King of Cards, I really got invested in seeing the illustrious King Knight actually start out as just a pauper, and him stubbornly forcing himself through his story, essentially doing the fake it till you make it strategy, gradually building up followers and resources as he made a name for himself. It really endeared him to me. though unfortunately with his tale being a prequel, it kinda made the ending pretty predictable. I also love King Knight for his campaign's unique level design and mechanics, having the shortest stages but enough of them crammed in to make his game the most jam-packed, with him body checking and spinning his way through them. And much like the other playable characters, he has a good number of tools, called heirlooms with an H, to grant him some unique abilities, from throwing exploding rats, slapping people with a dueling glove, and even a few that feel like they're pulling from Ike's moveset. Specifically his quick draw and ether. It's like the creators were trying to tell us something, like, please, add the king, not that shovel guy, although we can still keep him as an assist. And are you going to argue with Yacht Club Games? No, I don't think so. Put King Knight in. Number 2 is Dixie Kong. The first game I ever owned was Donkey Kong Country, and when we played it, I was Donkey and my younger brother, not Sam, was Diddy. When we got 2, we decided to retain our roles. Him keeping Diddy while I got Dixie, then me being Dixie and him Kitty in 3. Those are 3 titles that hold a lot of warm memories for me, and I spent the majority of it playing Dixie, so she's always been my favorite Kong. Plus she's adorable, just look at her with her little pink hat, blonde ponytail, pearl earrings, and the way she chews gum and blows bubbles without a care. I also always felt like I got the better deal choosing her, since she could twirl her hair around to gently float to the ground, a pretty big advantage in a platforming game. Her inclusion would present a very big problem for me though, and that's that I always play Dixie. Shigeru Miyamoto could visit me tomorrow and offer to have an in-depth conversation with me over a round of Diddy's Conquest, and as much as I would relish the opportunity, I'd have to refuse if he didn't let me play my girl. If they put her in Smash, I might be locked out of the rest of the roster, and she's not even my top pick. And now for some honorable mentions before the dramatic conclusion. Lynn from Fire Emblem because I like Fire Emblem and she's the first character I ever met in the games proper. Plus a katana is slightly different from a sword, though I guess Sephi and kind of Cloud already had that covered. Malo from Super Mario RPG because I always felt more of a connection to him due to him being the only one with an actual storyline and character growth in that game. Yumi from Senran Kagura because I'd find it funny if Nintendo acknowledged the Booby series that their 3D technology inspired. Seriously, look up how the director came up with the idea for that one. Crystal from Star Fox because we could use a character from that series that doesn't just have the same recycled moveset. And no other reason. Etna and Prinny from Disgaea because I think it's big enough to merit inclusion, with the former having prominent roles in most games, the latter being the mascot, and the two kind of going together. And Octolink from Splatoon for racial equality. Now back to your regularly scheduled program. Of course my number 1 most wanted pick for the Smash roster is Zero. And I bet I know what about half of you are thinking. Oh good, another anime sword fighter, just what we were missing. And I bet I know what the other half of you are thinking. Wow, the most popular character from your favorite series, how predictable. But allow me to subvert expectations on both counts. Well, kind of. You see, my top pick is not this Zero, it's this Zero. And now I bet a lot of you are crying blasphemy, even if you were just critical of my choice a moment ago. But hey, I have my reasons. The biggest is the range of weapons that the Zero series has at its disposal. In the X games, Zero used primarily a sword and sometimes a buster, and while his own series kept the main focus on the Z-Saber, he gets a snap-out spear, a boomerang shield, a grapple whip, bouncy tonfas, and of course a buster, though it's more of a gun this time. If you include the Zero Knuckle as its own thing and all the other armaments he can snatch up with it, that adds several more. You could make an argument that X7 gives him a few extra weapons, but none of those have ever really felt fully fleshed out, and be honest, do you really want to acknowledge that entry anyway? And while Zero did get a suite of different tools in X8, a lot of those pretty much did the same thing, just making adjustments to the range and power of attacks. Not so with the ones in each of the Zero titles. The weapons unique to each game typically having gameplay functions outside of combat, such as making otherwise impossible jumps, and often being featured on the cover as well. It'd be easy to make Zero a hybrid fighter, with his extra weapons having extra features, like the recoil rod being used for jumps, the chain rod grabbing ledges, and the knuckle either being used for grabs or stealing items. And since he'd be using more than just the Z-Saber to fight, no one would get on his case for being just another sword fighter, right? Right, guys? Right? Guys? And hey, even if you're still set on the original Zero over his edgier iteration, they could just do the thing they do for several of the characters, like Robin and Cloud, where they alternate skins to be different versions of them, so best of both worlds. The default would just be 0-0 to account for his larger arsenal, And since this was meant to be more of a personal list, I should probably do more than just try to sell him on a mechanical level. He's one of my favorite characters of all time, there being just one that maybe beats him. He's incredibly cool, swinging around a sword when so many others are using guns. He was a comforting presence in X1, which is my favorite childhood game, and it continues to be into adulthood. And the Zero games made him even edgier, right when I was in my edgy phase. The writing in those games made a big impression on me as well. More importantly though, he just feels incredible to control. I originally found it too hard to clear any of the X games using him and just stuck to range, but these days, he's my preferred way to play. This remained true, perhaps more so in his own titles, which had a high barrier for entry, and I got my first clears by bashing my head into the brick wall that was its difficulty. But now I have a much smoother time. Zero is the measuring stick for how much I've improved at games, particularly platformers, so while there is a definite learning curve to controlling him, when you get it down, it's amazing and you feel like a badass. My current main is Mega Man, and I'd like to think I'm half decent, but if they would just give me Zero, I feel like I could be unstoppable. While it was hard to narrow it down to 10, those are the ones I'd pick if Nintendo decided to do 2 more fighter passes and, for some bizarre reason, asked me who I wanted. My door is always open, Sakurai-san. I think I had a pretty good mix of Nintendo, third-party, and indie, which I guess would also be third-party, but you get my gist. Really hope we see at least a few of these guys when the next Smash comes around, and I even thought that it might be a good idea to wait until then, but who knows when that'll be, I might change my mind by then. I can do a double dip occasionally. Anyway, thanks for watching this kind of untimely video, and if you can be bothered this late after the fact, please feel free to tell me your own most wanted. Then again, GameFAQs has taught me that it's never too late to argue over this topic. Oh, and before it completely slips my mind, maybe consider subscribing if you enjoyed this or just Mega Man stuff in general, since that's my typical fare. For everlasting smash.